Frank Giavella with The Contending. Iceland's international feature Oscar entry is the mesmerizing romance mystery drama Touch. I'm pleased to welcome the filmmaker Baltasar Kormákur and his son Pálmi, who co-stars in the film. Congrats to both of you. It's a wonderful film, and Pálmi, you're really impressive in your lead debut.
Thank you, Frank.
So I want to start. The film delves into trauma of one of the world's most devastating events and its generational consequences, but through the scope of two lovers. Balthazar, can you speak to wanting to adapt the book and your eventual collaboration with Olafsson?
Yeah, when I read the book, I had no inclination or idea about where this was taking me, and I kind of loved the slow burn of the mystery of this lost love and this old man trying to understand what had happened, and then actually totally grabbed me by the throat when I realized where it was heading, and it's very unusual in Icelandic literature, something like this, and to take on such big thing as the Hiroshima bombing, and the consequences of it. And I was both. It was a very challenging thing to take on, but at the same time, I couldn't resist it. And I actually read it in 2 days. Lilia, my daughter, gave me the book, and uh, and I called him. I think it was around Christmas, and I called him after 2 days. It took me only 2 days to read the book, and I said, if he would join me on this journey to adapt this, and he was more than ready. And interesting enough, we started working with them and having a contract, and I think we signed a contract half a year later, on the
Wow.
novel, just done on trust. And it actually, there are three things they say you shouldn't do. Is like you shouldn't work with children, animals, and novelists,
Yeah.
you know. and and I have had some difficult experiences working with novelists, to be honest, but this was not one of them. He was wonderful, and we were actually working on two other projects together at the time. Now, yeah.
Was it a fairly easy road to getting it made, or did you run into any roadblocks?
I mean, it's one of the most complicated films that I ever made, to be honest. I mean, it's actually more complicated than Everest. If you, I know it's hard to believe, but it is because of the cultural. I mean, it's three continents no, sorry, two continents, three countries, three languages. So it's really and all the kind of background or work we had to do and about restaurants at this time, restaurants at this time in London. There were very few of them, so it was very complicated to get this done. But it was a fairly easy, if you can say easy, to get it financed. It wasn't. There was quite a bit of interest in from foreign companies to join this production. So yeah, but it wasn't. I wouldn't say easy, but I've seen it more complicated.
Well, that's good to hear, actually. Palmi, tell me about why you wanted to play this role. I read that your dad wasn't even initially aware you were auditioning. Is that true?
Yeah. Well, I had read the book for a completely unrelated reason. I was assigned to it in Icelandic class. So I was failing my Icelandic class, and the teacher said, "Okay, go read this book and do a project on it, and you can make up for the failing the class." So I had read the book, completely unrelated, and yeah, I just was very drawn to this character. It's a character that I think is very close to me. Um, I've said before that didn't really feel like I was acting. It's a very like it's a lot of me in that character, and I was called up for an audition for three different parts, uh, and I mean, I've never wanted to be like in front of a camera. It's not it's not a a trait of mine to seek like attention. And I even get nervous like doing these interviews. And but I was reading some fundamentalist Buddhist scriptures, and was very in that kind of headspace at the time, and I was so I guess afraid of doing the audition that I thought to myself, I should. It's like a walk on coals. I'll just do it for the pain of doing it. And then I did the audition, and I thought it went horribly, but I guess people disagree with, or somebody disagreed with that. Yeah.
Now, this is your first time. Like, I know you had little bit roles, when you were a kid, but this is your first time collaborating as father and son filmmaker and actor. Can you speak a little bit about separating the professional and the personal? And do you think at the end of the shoot, it maybe enhanced your relationship, if I may ask that?
Do you want me, Pálmi, you want to answer that, or you want me to start?
Yeah, I can answer it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's of course it's a tricky distinction to make, but I think it was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, and in especially in my relationship with my dad. It's something very special, to get to work in this capacity, and especially in a creative capacity, with your father. It's an absolute privilege, and I think it definitely um, enhanced our relationship.
I would say the same. It's something. When you. I mean, I was as you said earlier. I wasn't seeing this as this wasn't my idea. It wasn't something I thought he was even interested in or capable of. But when I saw the audition, it was like, oh shit, now I'm in trouble because because first of all, I have to explain this in every interview, and then
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
it's going to be a lot of that. But it was kind of inevitable because I showed the audition to Focus. I showed the audition to my other, and everyone was like, he's looking for a lot of people, a lot of good young actors, but it wasn't just right for it, and it just happened to be a Pálmi was totally right for the role and was doing it beautifully. But people often think about the fact that you're nepotism and you're helping your children or something like that. I actually come from the other kind of direction on it. I was more worried to put my child in a position where it might hurt the child. So I was more concerned about that than the film, to be honest. And I didn't want to do that because that's something we've seen. Kids get into trouble and having a lot of issues dealing with the consequences of it. So I wanted to make sure it was 100% right. When we started rehearsing, on the other hand, in London, Pálmi got very nervous and creating this relationship with this young, beautiful actress, Koki. And I was a bit worried then, and I thought, shit, what's going on? Is he not going to pull through? But then we started shooting. I was like, never happened, like he was totally there. So I don't know what it is with his psyche, but it was a very kind of, but it was kept you on your toes and interesting. But I have to say, yeah, it did give me and Pálmi something, and it's incredibly rewarding. And then to put aside the opportunity of film or whatever, is in general to work with your child as a grown-up and having to meet it as an equal. If a director and actor are pretty equal, though the director is maybe running the show a little bit, it's still creatively you are meeting someone you're working with. You're not just bossing around. So I think it's an experience that every parent should have in one way or another, you know, because
Well, I think,
you also you create a different and respectful relationship.
yeah, no, well, I think it's a tribute to how well it worked out that I've seen 81 of the 85 submissions. Touch is one of my favorites. And I had no idea. I try not to read too much beforehand. I had no idea he was your son while I watched the film, and I thought he was incredible in it. And then later on looking, I'm like, oh, same last name. What's going on here? I want to speak about the film specifically. You mentioned the multiculturalism. What you guys, the authenticity of the feel of the late 60s, I thought you nailed. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to getting that tempestuous time in history, and especially in Europe, so right.
You know, I think one of the things I didn't want. I mean, I looked at a lot of documentaries from the time, and often when people make films in a certain period of time, they tend to look of the things from the time and kind of only focus on them. So it's not, they don't, you know, like an apartment would be like very 70s, you know, like everything bought from a store in the 70s. As most of the apartments would probably have, you know, a lot of things from the grannies and you know, their ancestor and people. So it would be mixed with things. So it wouldn't have only this one layer. And there are too many hippies in the 70s films because there weren't that many hippies around, you know, like that was a very, we know about them a lot, but if you would have seen, if you see documentaries all the time, you don't see too many of them on the streets because there may be 50% of people or something where you know, kind of going with that. So I was trying to make it as full as possible. But I have to say also another interesting thing, Pálmi's physique is very you know, right for the period for me. I think, you know, most actors are too muscle and too much gym, you know, looking for that time. Nobody went to the gym at that time. Such details are very important, you know, to me. I don't know, but it is that just, you know, a fact given to him, and I like the kind of lankiness and that. And so I was looking all to all those details, but then it comes to a more complicated thing. I'm sorry how long my answer is that we had to dig in to understand what kind of restaurants were at the time and what kind of food they were serving,
Yes.
because that's where you have very little to go after. There was 3 restaurants, but we found a couple, very old couple, who actually did run a restaurant, Japanese restaurant, one of the 3, I think, in that era. And we just, you know, sucked every information out of them we could. And we went to Japan to buy, you know, antique stores to buy into the restaurants because we built the restaurant on stage in Iceland. And then, of course, we brought on every Japanese person in Iceland to work on it, but also we brought people from Japan like Yoko and Naruhoshi to you know, and also we worked quite closely with the actors to get you know, everything right. And we're dealing with an incredibly sensitive subject in Japanese culture. It's not, it's the hibakusha, you know, thing all up to now, honestly, and that the Hidanku, you know, were granted the Nobel Prize. I don't know if you know about this,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
and nobody was talking about this. When the actors read about it, it's like, we haven't seen anything about it in Japan. So it's very interesting that a foreigner is dealing with it, and now it's kind of been celebrated by these people who are getting the Nobel Prize. That, you know, I think they're showing them the film in Norway, you know, next to it because of, and I went to Hiroshima to show it, you know, and
Mm,
that was a stressful situation, but it was very rewarding that the people, you know, the mayor, the head of the peace museum, and one of the Koki, one of the recipients of the Nobel Prize, were just, you know, loving the movie and very supportive about it, and thought it was a great thing that this was going out in the world. So it's like but the more important thing is that I think we are waking up to a horrible, you know, thing that we might have another nuclear bomb coming, you know.
yeah.
And I think that's one of why it was so urgent to me. Like, it's a beautiful way, or if you say beautiful, of telling a story in a very simple way, to focusing only on one victim, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the consequences of that, and how it ripples, through continents and affects people's lives forever. And I thought it was a beautiful way of just, simplifying the story and hopefully making people come to think about where we might be heading. I mean, I think everyone is aware of the danger, but I think deep down, the consequences that those people had to, suffer are not maybe something we are thinking about every day, And I think it's rather than finger pointing and say, Pearl Harbor, end of the war, all that. That's all right and fine, but that's not nothing to do with those people who endured it, like, and that's the kind of war crime that it's about.
Yeah, the survivors. I mean, well, you
Yeah.
mentioned the restaurant, and my thing, there was such joy in those restaurant scenes. It kind of gave the audience a respite, ironically, from, the search and everything else going on, and establishing that atmosphere. Pálmi, you speak a little bit about that. Did you really learn how to cook?
Yeah, yeah. There's a chef in the Japanese embassy in Iceland that I went to see, and he taught me a lot about, knife technique and different types of, because in pop culture it's mostly like sushi and tempura, and people don't really, or most people, Westerners don't really know about like the like huge array of different Japanese cuisine. So he taught me a lot about that, and now I only have Japanese knives in my knife drawer. Uh,
Very cool. Well, Balthasar, I wanted to ask about the significance of the song that Kristófer sings.
Yeah. I mean, it's an old Icelandic song that I found actually myself after a big search, and I wanted to bring a song that would be believable that he would be singing at the time, so it's appropriate. The lyrics were kind of something that he, could sing with a different meaning, in different I would bring him through the generations, and I don't know, I just love this song, and it's not a overly recognized song, and actually I sent it to Pálmi because Pálmi is very into music, much more than actually me. He's more kind of specific in music. And because he didn't like, because he had to sing it as well, he didn't like, something that had been written in the script originally, which was another song. And uh, and I think he had the same reaction, loving the song. And there's something about this song. It's just, and of course, Egill, who is one of, and he's not kind of doing what he's best at. He's really a fantastic singer. He's actually one of the most famous singers in Icelandic history,
Oh, wow.
So all to Kristófer. So it was kind of, and connecting. I don't know. It was an instinct rather than necessarily it's not too symbolic. It's kind of pretty clear what he's singing as well.
Yeah, it's really effective. Pálmi, you have a line to Miko where you say, "I'm terrified of you." I feel like that's his defining line.
yeah, I did we improvise that line? I think I don't remember if it was in the script or not.
I can remember,
Uh,
anyway, it was very right when it was said. I'm
yeah.
not sure if I think it might have been there, but anyway, yeah, go.
Yeah, I think there is of course, I mean it's the character is like, from Iceland in the 1960s. Uh, Iceland in the 1960s was a very different place than Iceland in the 2020s. So you take just the culture shock of an Icelander moving to London during this time, and then uh, entering a completely different culture. I think that's apt in, uh, you pointing out, it kind of describes the character, but also, of course, it's a him meeting her is very much a clash of these different, you know, archetypes. He's kind of this soft-spoken, almost introverted person, but she's more like brash, forward, and I can see why that terrifies him. It would terrify me as well.
Well,
One of the beauties I think of Christopher characters, what I love is that he's very quiet, but he's courageous. He's a guy who's like curious, and he sees something, and it doesn't mean that he steps in even if he's afraid. Like
yeah,
he's not like somebody who comes in, hey, he's kind of observing and he's afraid, but he still does it. He's curious enough to go forward, and I think he is during his after this kind of love is lost, he loses some of that quality in his life, and curious, but it's brought back on this journey of the old man
mm,
that that's why he gets the tattoo. He does things that he hasn't done for 50 years, and that's brought back in him. That is kind of just moving forward and taking the chances, and that's what becomes life. That's
yeah.
those turns in your life become your life, and unless you kind of cave in, which is what I feel he does after this kind of trauma of losing her.
Absolutely, and yet he had no real option. Balthazar, you have a storied career. You started as a theater actor. Can you speak a little bit about the transition to film directing and when you knew that you wanted to be a filmmaker?
I've been doing a lot of. I was quite successful in directing theater and also playing in it. I graduated as a drama from the drama school of Iceland. But it was actually when I was shooting my first feature, one Reykjavik. It was like the things you do in life is like they lead you to another thing, and you just like you don't know why, but it just drags you in. You're just there. I was just writing scripts and doing it, but I wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna be this filmmaker. I'm gonna go to Hollywood or whatever. I wasn't thinking at all like that, and it didn't. It doesn't exist in our history. There's no one who has really gone across the Atlantic or done anything, outside Iceland in filmmaking, in front of me. So I, but I remember when I was doing 101 Reykjavik and I was lying under a crane the whole day to do this kind of shot from the roof into, finding the character jerking off to some, exercise video or something in the beginning. And it was, I remember, and then okay, it's a wrap, we're done. And I was like, fuck, the day is gone. I was like, I had been totally taken the whole day, my whole, I never, when I was acting, I was like, oh, when I was done, like there was always a part of me that wasn't fully engaged, if I say so, or, what's going to happen, what's happening with my family. I have to get to the bank. I was just totally forgot myself. And I felt like I was using all of my abilities, like I was, and that's such a gratifying feeling. And I think it still does, like you're just there and you're just
Mm,
working. You just forget everything while you're doing it. And it can be, difficult for your family because you're a lot away and you get very much deep into what you're doing. But it is, I would say to anyone, if they have this opportunity of finding that where they feel like that, it's very gratifying.
mm. Well, Everest is one of my favorites of your films. Just want to let you know that.
Thank
The
you so
way the
much.
way you manage that ensemble, dear God. Um, Palmy, I want to ask, after delivering honestly such a wonderful, poignant performance, do you plan on pursuing this? And are they knocking at your door already?
Uh, Pursuing it, I mean, right now I'm in the Netherlands and I'm studying art science at the Royal Arts Academy. So I'm in, I've got my head down in a you know adjacent but different field. Um, I think, I mean, I'm raised around movie sets, and there's always this magic of this machine that comes together uh, when you make movies that has always fascinated me since I was a child, and it still does. Every time I see it, I'm just, taken aback. And yeah, I think there's yeah, I think I won't be um, out of it for very long.
Well, that's good for both of you. Balthazar, what do you have coming up next?
I'm in Australia now, doing a film with Charlize Theron and Taron Egerton, which is a kind of nature thriller. So it's a very different and big budget thing. So back to that, and I have like, I built a studio in Iceland, three sound stages and a company. So we have quite a lot of things coming up, Icelandic and international production. So yeah, there's it's quite a roster right now.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you both for taking the time out. The short list is coming out soon, and I hope Dutch is on it.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much. Thank you, Frank, and it was great talking to you.
Likewise, have a great day.
Bye bye.